Hello, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm live from my guest room, which is a little more echoey than my room, but the lighting is better right now, so we're staying in here for a little bit. But anyway, today is a wrap-up day, so we're going to discuss all the books that I read in the month of September. September, I would say, was a generally good reading month for me. However, I did get kind of a reading slump at the end of the month, or I would just say I needed a pause in my reading. I just knew that I didn't want to read, so I did something else. So at the end of the month, I didn't read as many books as in other months. But it's okay. It's okay to take a break from reading when you're not feeling it. So let's start off with the mangas and then go into the prose books. So the first manga I read this month was Welcome to the Ballroom Volume 4 and Volume 5 by Tomo Takechi. And this is a sports anime focusing on ballroom dancing. It's one of my favorite animes, so I've been excited to pick up and collect the manga. And I am dedicated to completing and collecting the series. I can get all the volumes except 7, which is weirdly backordered. I ordered it from Penguin, so let's see if it ever comes back in stock. But the 11th volume is coming out later in October, so I'm excited to read and collect these, and hopefully my 7th volume will come back in stock. I will say that these 2 volumes, we really get into the swing of things. This is around the end of the first season of the anime going into the second season, or the second half of the first season, and I feel like it just really takes its strides in those moments. Our main character is coming into himself, being more confident, and this is also when he's getting his own dance partner, so it's like a pretty big plot moment. And yeah, I really like this turn of events, and I just really like where the plot goes from here, and I'm excited to continue the series. The next thing I read was Descending Stories Volume 2. This again is an anime that I loved, that I'm going back to read the series, and I'm still on the fence about collecting the series, to be honest. So far, I feel like the anime is a little bit more effective because you're just seeing it in real time. If you don't know, Descending Stories is all about this Japanese form called rakugo, and it's basically a storyteller telling these different stories. There's a whole hierarchy system about storytellers and like going up the ranks, and it's basically this old man who's like the legendary rakugo storyteller telling his own personal story to his descendants, kind of, or the people who hope to inherit his like title kind of thing. And so this is really starting to get into the backstory, which is where my love of the series really came from. But I will say, again, going back to the anime is just slightly more effective because you're actually seeing the stories being told, and it's just not as effective as just the still images telling the story. I'm gonna keep going with this series because I do really want to see the discrepancies in how this story is told versus the anime. I think one of the strengths of the anime is that it's very ambiguous. Our storyteller is not a moral person, and he's not the most honest narrator, which actually plays into the whole storytelling aspect. And I feel like the strength of that story, or the theme of it, is that you really can't tell what the true story is, and that you have to rely on how you interpret the story to kind of make up your mind if this guy has done some bad things in the past, or if he hasn't, if he is a bad guy or if he isn't. And so far, I'm just not seeing that same strength that I felt watching the anime that I did reading the series, but I want to see how it plays out to a particular scene. So I'm gonna keep going for now, but I am enjoying this overall, and if you're looking for a historical manga or anime, this is a great one to pick up. Going into comics, I read Genderqueer this month. I actually did an entire video where I was reading and vlogging my experience reading banned books, and so this of course was one of the ones I picked up because it is such a heavily banned and talked about book right now in the media, and it's something that I've always wanted to read. This is the new like expanded special edition, and I really enjoyed it. I related a lot more to this book than I thought I would, and I got a lot out of it. I will say that the illustrations and art style and coloring style isn't my favorite, but I did really enjoy the story. This is a memoir about Maya's life and just about M figuring out their pronouns, just figuring out what it means to be queer for the M. And yeah, it was just really insightful, and I really enjoyed this and would highly recommend it to a reader who is looking for this kind of memoir. It was really impactful. Continuing with books that I read for that readathon, I also read Melissa, which is a short fiction novel, a children's fiction novel about a young girl who wants to be Charlotte in the school's production of Charlotte's Web. And I also read All Boys Aren't Blue, which is another memoir, but this one a prose memoir all about George M. Johnson's life. And so if you want more of my thoughts, opinions about these two novels, I would highly recommend watching that vlog, as well as if you want to hear more of my thoughts and opinions on genderqueer. But going into books that I did not read for that particular vlog, I have Nick and Charlie. This is a short novella by Alice Oseman, and this is connected to the Heartstopper comic, and this is like one of the short novellas that Alice has written. This winter kind of covers some stuff that's kind of glossed over in the comic, and this is supposed to be the ending of the comic, I believe. I think we will get this as comic form, or at least parts of it as comic form, but I think this is something that Alice wrote a pretty long time ago and got published, and it's kind of like a supplementary story to the Heartstopper story. And I will say I much prefer the Heartstopper story as a graphic novel. I think it just works a little bit better. We're a little bit more distant from Nick and Charlie's perspective, and in this we're in first person and we're very close to their brains, and I just feel like it works a lot better as a comic. I didn't hate this, but like this winter, it just doesn't work for me quite as well, so I gave it a 3 stars. It's solid, it's cute, especially if you're really into the comic, but it's not my favorite of Alice Oseman's prose, and I do believe this is something, again, that they wrote a very long time ago, so I do think their writing has improved a lot from when they originally wrote this. And finishing off the books that I read this month, I have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. So if you don't know, Robin Hobb is 90s, early 2000s maybe? I'm trying to figure out when they were the most prolific. But anyway, Robin Hobb is this really prolific fantasy writer of the 90s to 2000s, maybe a little bit in the 80s as well. And I think most of her work has taken place in this world that we see in the Farseer trilogy. But this is the first book in the Farseer trilogy, and it's mainly following this young boy as he grows up. And I just found this book really, really interesting and well done. It has a lot of the typical kind of like fantasy stuff that you think of when you think of classic Western fantasy, the like medieval setting, a lot of the kind of similar tropes that you will see, like a bastard son and like kind of the hierarchy of the imperial society, but it also has a more narrative, very close perspective. This is first person and it's Fitz telling his life kind of in a sort of framed narrative. So again, we're close to his perspective, but we also have some of his reflections. And just with like older fantasy, we aren't as close to characters' heads. We don't get as close to their emotions. So it's a lot more easy to feel endeared towards characters and to feel for their plots and to feel for the things that happen to them. This was just really enjoyable. I really love the characters. Robin Hobb just writes really complex, nuanced characters that you feel like you should hate but end up loving, characters that are really easy and fun to hate, and it just works so well. This book is really slow paced. It's really about just Fitz growing up, but I kind of loved that. It was almost slice of life until it got into the main plot, and just her slow build of plot was just really excellently done, and I'm really excited to read the rest of her books. I'm just really invested now. This was originally written in 1995, which is a year before I was born, but it still feels very contemporary to kind of writing that we have today. But again, it does call back to a lot of classic tropes and classic fantasy, Western fantasy style stuff. And it's just like a really good blending of like the canon with the more contemporary, closer character driven stories that we have. And yeah, I just went into this series not knowing exactly what to expect, and I was just so pleasantly surprised by it. And this is definitely one of my new favorite things. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And again, I'm just really excited to continue the series because I really enjoyed this. Also, it's a book that I read very slowly, like I would listen to a chapter a night kind of a thing. And I think I took almost like 12 to 20 days to read it. I read it from August into September, and that experience was just really lovely. Just like reading a little snippet every single day. And I kind of want to go back to that because I did really enjoy that. I'm not great about reading 2 books at once, so that's my only dilemma, but I did really enjoy the experience of reading a book slowly and just being invested in it the entire time. But yes, these are all the books that I read this month, but let me know what y'all read in the comments down below. I would love to know any new favorites, all that kind of jazz. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.